Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy-to-understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, we are back for another episode of the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. And Bobby, today we have another exciting topic. We are going to be talking about, do you actually need a lawyer when you're getting divorced? So, people start to think about, how much is it going to cost? Am I just filing paperwork? What if we agree? Some people feel like, well, maybe, do I need an attorney or do I not? So on a very high level, Bobby, why don't you just kind of start us out? Because we're going to get into the details of, sort of like things to think about with the whole topic of, do you need an attorney when you're getting a divorce?
Yeah, the short answer is, and surprise, because I am one. This really is a surprise. No, you don't need a lawyer. Like this isn't rocket science. This isn't surgery. This is, on one hand, just paperwork. It is really important paperwork, and obviously, and we're going to dive into this. If the paperwork says certain things and you don't read it or you don't understand it, that can be a problem. But I have seen throughout my years doing this, and I have helped people do this without, full representation, people that have seven figure of assets do this without a lawyer. Now, the big question here is, what is your relationship with risk, and how much do you value peace of mind versus paying, say, $5,000, because that's about what it's going to cost you to get an uncontested divorce. So really, it's about, are you comfortable with this? Do you need a lawyer in order to kind of chaperone yourself through this, even if you have a simple type of case?
Yeah. Okay. Well, then let's just kind of go through this conversation because, now we've posed the question. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And we'll kind of talk through some of those reasons why. And I think we're going to start with like a story, a scenario, because we love doing these scenarios. And, what if there's a case where, somebody does their own paperwork and they file thinking that they're divorced. And then all of a sudden, a couple years down the road, they go to get remarried. And this person finds out, oops, they're actually still married. They never actually got divorced. So kind of talk us through the scenario and some of what happens.
So we actually had a case like this, and what I recall happening was something like, our client got married, and then his wife said, I want a divorce. Here's the paperwork, sign it. And he just signed off on it, gave it back to her. And he just assumed that she did the rest. And he didn't quite understand that there are procedures and a process and a verification that needs to happen. And so he assumed he was divorced. He then got married again. And if I recall, he might have gotten married a third time. He might have, because he didn't really understand it. And he didn't realize that he wasn't divorced from these women until there was some pension issue that came up with his third wife, where she might have been getting a divorce from him. Either way, it was a real mess. We had to go in and clean it all up. It cost a lot of money to clean up because there was some pretty technical stuff that we had to do on the legal side of things.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing worse I can think of trying to divorce one wife is divorce two and then divorce three at the same time. That sounds pretty complicated.
It is. And it could have been avoided by him, just one lawyer being involved, or at least him going and seeing that judgment with the judge signing it. You can't just assume things are happening in court because you handed off paperwork to the other side. So if you're not going to have a lawyer involved, then you need to be involved pretty closely with the case and really understand what's going on. If there is a lawyer involved, then that lawyer has an ethical duty, a professional duty to do things correctly. So there's like this higher level, this higher standard of expertise that's involved. So you can rely on things getting done Whereas if it's just your spouse on the other side, who knows if they did it correctly or if they did it at all.
Right. So lesson learned here is if you are going to do it yourself, make sure that it actually goes through and that you are legally divorced.
Yes. Yes,
So
absolutely.
why don't we just start with, times when you may not need a lawyer. So let's talk through, what might be some scenarios where maybe you even agree. You're like, okay, maybe you should consider that you don't need an attorney.
Yeah, I think the basic scenario is a short marriage. You don't have any property, significant property. You don't have any real estate. Maybe you have retirement accounts, but you're keeping your own retirement accounts. In these sorts of scenarios, you could probably get it done on your own as far as the legal aspect. But you do have to worry about still, like, am I waiving properly my right to the other side's retirement account, or have they waived their right to my retirement account? Those are things that are going to have to be in the paperwork. And even if you are doing it on your own, you have to be comfortable doing this paperwork. So yes, a simple divorce like that is probably fine to do on your own. Caveat: don't hold me responsible if something goes wrong, because that's what we're paying for here is some sort of peace of mind.
Well, you mentioned how comfortable you are with risk earlier. So would you say that, if you agree on everything, is there low or no risk, or is there still risk involved?
There's still going to be some risk. Like, let's say that you do have some real estate, or there's a car involved, and you agree that we're gonna sell this house and we're gonna split the proceeds, and there's no issue. We're not fighting over how much of the proceeds each of us is going to get. Then you finalize the divorce, and something happens. For some reason, the house can't be sold, and then there becomes an issue because one of you is living in the house and the other one isn't, and one of you loses their job, and you can't pay. The person living in the house loses their job and they can't pay for the mortgage. But you then look at your divorce documents and they're not considering that situation. It doesn't say clearly who's supposed to pay the mortgage. And now you're kind of off the guardrails, and it is a problem. So there's some risk there, but maybe you're listening to this and you're saying, well, what's the likelihood of that? I'm okay with that. I'm not going to pay $5,000 just in case that happens. Well, there you go. There's your comfortableness with risk.
Yeah. How common is it for you at your firm that people who have maybe gone through a divorce, done the paperwork on their own, but maybe down the line there's been an issue, so now they feel like they do want some representation because they need to change something or something's come up? Does that happen, often, that someone's gone through a divorce, done it themselves, but they're kind of unhappy, so now they're coming to you later?
It definitely happens, and it's hard for me to say what percentage of DIY divorces turn into problematic scenarios, because I only see the ones that become problems. But we do get a few every year where they did it on their own, and then something like this house scenario happens, and so we have to come in and try to clean it up. So I think for the most part, probably, you're okay. If you have the tenacity, if you have the focus to get through a divorce on your own, to go do the paperwork, to go to the courthouse, to go through the judgment and check the right boxes, and to communicate with your spouse and get it done, chances are it'll be okay. But are you comfortable with the 20% chance that it's not, and that the thing that you missed is going to cost you $20,000, $30,000 of attorney's fees down the road? That's a personal decision. Like, you might be okay. You might be worried. You might not get an attorney involved because you're worried that they're going to throw a wrench in the works. I think that's why a lot of people just want to keep the attorneys out of it. They're like, let's just get this done on our own. If we get attorneys involved, then they're going to make us, want to fight about this. And some attorneys could do that. I would hope that most attorneys wouldn't. Our firm, certainly, we kind of have the opposite philosophy. We want to get this done diplomatically, but that is a concern that people have.
Is there ever an option where, let's say, the two decide, hey, we're going to write up everything, we've agreed on everything, can we just hire an attorney by the hour to read it and maybe earmark things that, would be potential issues? Is that ever an option?
It sounds great in theory, but it's hard to find a lawyer that's going to do that. Usually when you get a lawyer involved, one, your lawyer can only represent you. One lawyer can't represent both parties because you guys are inherently, although it feels like you're in agreement, you're actually, from a legal perspective, in conflict. Meaning, advice that I would give you is different than advice I'd give your spouse. Like, I wouldn't be able to look at your proposed agreement, represent both of you, and say, you know what, wife, this is a great deal for you. Husband, this is a bad deal for you. Lawyer can't give advice to both parties like that. So that's one issue. The other issue is, even if we decided, okay, Greer, I'm going to be the one that gets a lawyer, and I hire that lawyer is going to look and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable using your paperwork. I'm going to have to redraft this from the very beginning. And that lawyer's not comfortable using your paperwork because they're on the hook for the divorce at that point. Once they're hired, it's their liability, their insurance that's going to be looking at it if something goes wrong. And so they're going to say, this is going to be more time consuming for me to read your documents, make sure your documents are correct in a way that I'm comfortable with, rather than just me drafting this from the beginning. Because as attorneys, we have our templates. We have our foundational documents that we start with that we know are legally sound. Whereas if we use yours, we don't know where it came from. We don't, we have to look at every single provision very closely and, tweak it to make it right. So great idea in theory. I wish it worked more, but it's just tough. There's like these annoying legal problems that get in the way.
Yeah, I feel like that's really nice to understand that, though, as someone who's not an attorney, to go, okay, that makes sense. And so we're really in that camp of, does it make sense that you're going to do this on your own, or does it make sense that you need an attorney? And let's talk about that. So when are the instances where you absolutely better get an attorney to make sure that things go well with this divorce?
I think the number one place to get an attorney, or an attorney can be most helpful, is actually when the emotions are really running hot. A good divorce attorney can come in and be a voice of reason, both to you and to your spouse potentially, and your spouse, hopefully they get an attorney that is a voice of reason. And those attorneys can just talk objectively to each other, and then talk to their clients, and provide, a little bit of therapy to their clients, and understanding, and help them come to terms with the kind of concessions that need to be made in the case. And they can help their clients avoid fighting it out, because once you start fighting it out as a couple, it's going to be a litigation mess and become extremely expensive and not be productive at all. So that's kind of the number one reason. And then as far as, the technical reasons, or the more substantive stuff, if there's kids involved, and I think just in general, if there's kids involved, having an attorney help you see the forest through the trees, help you predict issues that might come up in the future, is really helpful. And then if you have any sort of significant assets or significant debts, you want an attorney to look at those and help you figure out those problems, like the house selling problem, or how to split a retirement account, or how to evaluate a business. If there's a business involved, I can't imagine getting a divorce without a lawyer.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up some really great points. And some of the ones that stick out to me is, I think, typically someone who isn't an attorney doesn't necessarily know their rights, when you're getting divorced, of what you're entitled to. And I think there's a lot of questions and things that attorneys bring up that you're not even potentially even thinking about, to be honest. You may not know different types of custody agreements, you may not realize a discrepancy in your incomes, may equal, some child support, or, there's just a lot of things I feel like you don't know. And then also there's certain things I feel like that the attorney brings up that kind of help in the future, that when these issues arise, you don't even know they're going to happen, but they arise and you've sort of already dealt with it. So I think those are just really great reasons, to have an attorney help.
When I talk to people for the first time about the divorce process and about custody and give them kind of the custody child support 101 talk, there's a lot of people that have no idea, for example, that if you have less than 40% of parenting time, your child support is significantly higher than if you have more than 40% of parenting time. Like that's a fundamental thing that you need to know in order to understand your rights and obligations. And if you go into court and you've agreed to less than 40% time, but let's say you talk to your spouse and they say, well, you don't have to pay child support. Okay, great. It feels really good. It seems like, okay, we have a good scenario. I'm going to have every other weekend, but we have a different financial arrangement. We don't have to do child support through the court case. You're there on the final day to finalize your divorce, and you have a judge who is a stickler for child support, and he might look at it and say, okay, I see that you have less than 40% time here. What's your income? Okay, I'm setting child support at $1,000 per month. And just like that, you have this $1,000 per month obligation that you didn't think you were going to have at all, because you have a judge who doesn't do cases without child support. And that happens. And so an attorney could probably help you navigate around that. There are workarounds. There are ways to present things to judges so that they're more accepting of it. We've seen it. We've been down that road. We've been in front of that particular judge. We know how they handle things. So again, that's the expertise that you're getting when you hire an attorney.
Yeah. And I think that just gives so much peace of mind to know that the attorneys have been through so many scenarios and they're able to kind of help you through yours, since it's probably, your first time. You don't really know, what you're getting into in some cases. And you mentioned before the hidden assets. So let's bring up like a scenario, right? And talk us through it. So let's say that there was a woman that they had an amicable dividing of everything without attorneys. They decided, okay, we're not going to, use attorneys. We're just going to split everything up. And then she hires you to do a review, and you discover, wait a minute, your spouse has this huge savings account that she doesn't even know existed, because she hired you. What now happens that, maybe wouldn't have before?
Yeah, well, I think and let's create a little context around this. If we take this scenario and let's say that she goes through the entire divorce and that she signs off on everything, and then she finds out about this hidden account, can we go back and undo the case? Most likely not, especially if it's past 30 days when this was finalized. If we're within that first 30 days, it's possible to undo it. There's a much greater possibility. If we're outside of that 30 days, but still within 2 years of when this was done, then she's got a mountain to climb, because what the court says is that you had your opportunity to find those hidden accounts. That was during the case that you had that opportunity, and you didn't use it. So therefore the issue is over. There are certain circumstances of fraud, and it's always worth looking into, possibly if the account is big enough. But most likely you're SOL. And if you're outside of even the 2 years, like, forget about it. Don't be looking at 5 years down the road and saying, oh man, they must have been hiding money because they're way more wealthy looking than I remember. It's too late at that point. So if you have any sort of concerns like that, you got to get a lawyer on the front end, because there's no fixing it on the back end. So if she does get a lawyer, if she says, you know what, I think I suspect that he's got some money that he's hiding, and she hires us, then that's when we're going to start the discovery process. And that is the formal process of sending requests to the other side that they have to answer. They have to turn over bank statements. We can send subpoenas to banks. we could send subpoenas to 20 banks to see what comes back and find that account. All of this really only makes sense if there's substantial assets involved. If we think he's hiding $10,000, honestly, unfortunately, there's not a really a way to hunt that down that makes sense financially. Like, you're going to spend more on our services than you're going to get.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So let's talk about a myth here, or is it a myth? That if you hire a lawyer, things will be more combative. Is that true, or is that a myth?
Depends on the lawyer. I have dealt with some very combative lawyers before. It's one of the reasons that professionally I really transitioned out of having to be in court or wanting to be in court. Is I didn't look forward to going into the courtroom because there was so much finger pointing. There wasn't problem solving. So if a lawyer gets involved who just inherently loves to litigate and go to court and fight, yes, it could become more involved and combative than it needs to be. So as you're searching for a lawyer, make sure that their strategy, their philosophy aligns with what you're trying to get done. We did a case recently where our client had negotiated 95% of what the agreement was going to be, and both parties were on the same terms. And there was infidelity. Usually in these cases, there's some sort of infidelity involved or some sort of breach of trust, and it's a really delicate situation. So if you negotiate an agreement and one side agrees to things like, in this particular example, I think they'd been together for 7 or 8 years, and he had a significant pension that he wanted to protect, and she was agreeing to say, I'm not going after your pension, which she could go after it. If she wanted to lawyer up, she could go after it. But I think that she felt guilty for the fact that she had cheated on him, and she was willing to just let it go. When he hired us, we had a long conversation before about what our strategy would be and how it was all about keeping things as diplomatic as possible and making sure that we were his partner in getting the divorce done, and that we were really working in tandem rather than doing things that might provoke her to lawyer up and to turn this into a fight. And so we were able to get this divorce done in less than 4 weeks and just like help them move on. Whereas if you hire the wrong lawyer, they might file the case right away, get her served at work without her knowing about it, or without her seeing it coming and getting surprised and embarrassed. And then she's getting all fired up and she's hiring a lawyer, and that lawyer's sending off a nasty gram to the other side. And there you go. So
yeah, it's escalating at that point.
Yeah, it's escalating. And that's what people get worried about when they say, I don't want lawyers to throw a wrench in the works. It's like, that definitely can happen. So you need to find the type of lawyer or law firm that doesn't operate that way.
Well, we've been talking a lot about risks today. And so what are some of the risks involved if you decide to not have legal representation?
Well, it's interesting because, following from that scenario that we just talked about, there was a risk there was a risk that the wife had in that scenario where she didn't lawyer up and she didn't get his pension. And it's like, okay, if you're listening to this, you're like, well, did we take advantage of her? There was that risk, but at the same time, she got something she wanted, and that was to move on and get out of this situation and maybe move in with this other guy. I don't know, but that's a risk. Did she quite understand what she was giving up? Now, in this particular instance, I know that she did because of her sophistication and understanding, and she knew you worked hard for your pension, so I'm not going to take it, even though I know I could take some of it. But there is that risk, because you don't understand that you're entitled to most likely 50% of a pension that's been accrued during your marriage. You don't understand that you're entitled to alimony for X number of years because your spouse makes substantially more than you, or that you're entitled to the equity in the house even though you were not the breadwinner and your spouse paid the mortgage. Those are the major risks on the property side. And then on the custody side, there's, like we talked about, you don't understand the child support implications, or the risk that you don't talk through all the different custody scenarios. What's going to happen in the summers, what's going to happen over the holidays, that things aren't really figured out enough. And so you have these ongoing issues as you go down the road. But, Greer, as I talk about this, there's a flip side to everything. And one of those flip sides is the risk of your divorce going on and on and on and not getting over is substantial as well. So like if you get tied up in fighting over every single penny or every single hour with your children and you don't get divorced, that can be really hard on your kids. Like for them to be stuck in this scenario where two parents are battling it out for 2 years, that's a huge risk as well, versus like you just got on to the next chapter. I'm a big person that's all about getting on to the next chapter and just moving forward, doing the best you can in the scenario, but making sure you're moving the energy forward and getting it done. So I think that that's a big risk that people have to consider as well.
Yeah. All that makes so much sense. And we talked a little bit about this, but another myth is that, if something goes wrong or if they go forward with a divorce and with terms that they can fix it later, but it's actually a little more complicated than that, or at least it can be, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't, it's really hard to unring the bell, as they say. And like we talked about, there are these time periods within the first 30 days. It's possible, although the judge isn't going to hand it to you, but you have your best chance of undoing or fixing something within the first 30 days of your divorce being finalized. But beyond that, it can be really, really hard, especially property issues. There's a very clear provision legally that says that you cannot modify property judgments. Basically, we can't go back into court and say that 50-50 split or that 60-40 split of the equity in the house isn't fair anymore because the market has tanked and we only got 30% of what we thought we were going to get. You can't go back and do that. You can modify custody provisions, but it's not easy. You really have to show the judge why whatever you chose is not working for the kids and it's in their best interest to change it. But you're looking at, one, throwing your kids, throwing the family back into this litigation scenario that can be really toxic. And it's probably going to be even more expensive than it would have been the first time around.
Yeah. So it really is important, ideally, to get it right the first time.
Get it right. Yeah.
Get it right. Now, let's talk about maybe some alternatives to full legal representation. Are there some options? Is it only kind of black and white, either you're represented or you're not represented, or is there kind of some additional options that are available?
Yeah, so we talked about, hiring that lawyer to maybe just look over your review or look over your documents, review your documents and make some changes, and why that can be challenging or to find a lawyer to do that. But there more and more, there are attorneys who are willing to do what's called limited scope representation, where they're not being hired for the full case, but they're just being hired for one particular part of it.
Okay.
There's also firms that will do flat fees for uncontested or agreed divorce. That's something that our firm intends to roll out this year as well. So that's an option. You could also just hire an attorney for an hour or two consultation. We do that. We call it consultative services, and we're just talking with you through the issues. Some of those cases, I feel like we can provide more value than anything else. Is if you get us involved early in the process, we can help you navigate those initial conversations with your spouse, strategies for negotiation, bringing things up, I like to bring things up on a very high level at first. Don't dive right into how are we going to sell this house. There's so much emotion tied up in the marital home, or how are we going to split the kids.
Mm-hmm.
There are strategies for getting this done piece by piece, and we can sometimes help clients do that just consulting with them, and then they can draft the documents. Again, there's risk involved because this is a contract we're talking about. I don't think people realize that what they're signing off on is legitimately a contract. And like any big, business merger or business separation, you would be foolish not to have attorneys at least review it and help you understand what you're signing off on. So even if they're not marking it up, they can help you understand, like, this is what you're agreeing to, and talk you through and make sure that that's really what you want to agree to.
Right. I feel like you're debunking the myth that if you hire a lawyer, you're committing to an expensive, drawn-out process. You're kind of showing us a way that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
No, yeah, you can do it. You can do it piecemeal. You can get your lawyer involved in the beginning, and maybe you say, you know what, I'm going to take it from here. Most of the time, though, once you get that lawyer involved, if they're a good law firm, you're going to understand the value that they bring and help you get to the other side. And, that cost is going to be the value they bring is going to be very clear.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've covered a lot today, Bobby. And so kind of just to recap, what are your thoughts on when to get an attorney versus when maybe not to have an attorney when you're going through a divorce?
Yeah. Even though I'm a lawyer and we do this and we're experts, I'm okay with people making, that personal decision for themselves. It really has to do with their relationship with risk, their willingness to figure out paperwork. You can go online, and if you type in DIY Illinois divorce, one of the first websites you should find is the government. That's the only one I would really use, is the government sanctioned one. I think it's a .gov is the URL, and there is step-by-step instructions on how to get a divorce, and there are forms on there. And by all means, you can go ahead and do that. But understand, those are bare bones forms. They do not cover more nuanced scenarios. They do not allow you to customize them that easily. So you can do it, but buyer beware. You're not going to get as much peace of mind as you would with an attorney. And that's up to you, what you want to decide at that point.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, thanks so much for all of your insight today. As always, I have learned a lot. And, it's just a great reminder that everyone's situation is different. And so you've got to do what's best for you and for your spouse so that you can, resolve this marriage and just move on, move on with your life. And, so if you need to kind of reach out to figure out the best thing for your scenario, you can always reach out to Bobby. But Bobby, thanks so much for a great conversation today. And I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.